Are you holding on to resentments and not able to forgive? Could this be draining your energy? Are you caught up in the stress of daily life? Is it hard for you to stop and be present in this moment right now? Could you imagine living your life without fear, worry, or doubt? Welcome to Inner Vision. I'm your host, Nita Valens. And now joining us by phone is Jack Kornfield, who is an author of many books. I have in my hand The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness, and Peace. And Jack will also be coming to Los Angeles very soon, early October, actually. And I'm so happy to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Nita. Pleased to be here.
That's great. So you will actually be doing an event at UCLA Ackerman Grand Ballroom, and it is called The Neuroscience of Well-Being, Mindfulness and Love, and you'll be on the venue with Dan Siegel, and this is put on by Lifespan Learn, and if you go to lifespanlearn.info, you can get all the information on this, and I wanted to say this early so people can check it out. So basically, this will be a big conversation for a couple of days, October 5th and 6th, where people in the profession can earn up to 13 continuing education hours, and neuroscience and Buddhist psychology will be the topic. How did you ever decide to pair up with Dan Siegel and talk about all of this? What's the connection there? Let's chat about that a little bit.
The work of Dan Siegel as a neuroscientist, particularly in the field of interpersonal neurobiology, looks at the ways that we affect one another and the ways that we affect the world. So the inner and outer are wed together in ways that have been missing in much of modern medicine and modern science. And it's a really great dialogue then with Buddhist psychology, because that sense of interdependence is built into the psychology. The other thing that's really great about working with Dan, besides that he knows the science so well, so he can say, yes, Elizabeth Blackburn's study shows that you can increase your sense of presence in relationship or in your work through the training of mindfulness versus mind wandering, or this is the research that shows that kids in school learn better when they have social and emotional learning skills. Their grades go up, or here's the integrative function or the immune function. In telomerase, your increased cell repair and longevity from Tanya Jacobs goes up in the studies through your work with the inner trainings of mindfulness. But I think a more important thing is that we all can sense that the outer developments of the world, the technology of computers, nanotechnology, biotechnology, all these things don't necessarily stop continuing warfare and racism and environmental destruction, and that there needs to be an inner transformation of humanity that's wedded to the outer transformation. And our dialogue in some ways is about that. How do you create love and connection? How do you do it in the individual, and how do you do it for the world?
So let's talk about you for a moment. How did you become interested as a psychologist in Buddhism, or were you a Buddhist first?
I went in the Peace Corps after majoring in university in Buddhism and Asian studies. Before that I was doing pre-med. And then I asked the U.S. Peace Corps to send me to a Buddhist country because I became very interested in Buddhist practice. And that's because in my Ivy League education at Dartmouth, there was outer education of math and physics and history and philosophy, but nobody taught me how to deal with the pain in my family, with a violent and abusive father, with a lot of fears that I had, with trying to find my best values, with how I could steady my mind or work with my emotions or deal with conflict. And so there was a whole part of education of the inner life that I needed desperately, and Buddhism, the teaching started to speak to that, so I wanted to go and find if there was some great Zen master who could teach me those things, and I lived in monasteries for quite some time, and as a great result or blessing, I got those kind of trainings. Then I came back to the U.S., and as a way of integrating them, I tried to understand what I'd learned and how they might be useful how I might be useful. And so I went back to graduate school in clinical psychology and now straddle those two worlds.
So did you find in Buddhism the answer to what was lacking in your education at Dartmouth? You found that inner life and how to resolve conflict? Or was that not until you got into psychology later on? Like, what were you discovering in your journey? You lived in monasteries. What countries were you in?
I was primarily studied in the monasteries of Thailand and Burma and India, but also other places as well. And I learned wonderful things. I learned the art of forgiveness, which no one taught in the university, or it wasn't part of my education, how to take the conflict and the difficulties of the past, ways that I had been hurt or maybe ways that I had harmed others, and through a systematic practice of the heart, there are ways to both ask and extend forgiveness that release you from the past. And without knowing forgiveness, you get these cycles of violence in the world between the Northern Irish Catholics and Protestants, or the Hutus and the Tutsis, or the Palestinians and the Israelis. But with the arts that I learned in the temple and monastery, there are ways to release the suffering or the trauma and shift to well-being and compassion. And now modern science, modern neuroscience, is showing the brain function and the neural integration that backs up the inner experience of this. So I learned forgiveness, I learned compassion and loving kindness practice, and I also learned just how to quiet my mind and steady attention, which gave me whole other capacities to be present that I didn't understand before.
Well, you said so many things that I feel like we need 2 more hours to discuss all of it, but what I want to go to is steady attention for a moment, because
Sure.
In recent years, you and I have talked before, I'm a psychotherapist. In recent years, I've noticed that the diagnosis of ADD, attention deficit disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has just proliferated. And now children as young as 5, 6, and 7 are on psychotropic drugs for these issues because they're not manageable in the classroom. So I'm thinking, well, how is it that, this has gone on and, these younger children are now on drugs and in the last, say, 20 years. And I just think this is a big social problem. Is there something that in your learning in terms of focus and attention that we are lacking in our culture or in our society, and we keep diagnosing all these people, even adults, of course? I'm not just picking on the kids, but, it's from 8 to 80. I've seen this.
It is an important question, Nita. And one of the things we'll do, Dan Siegel and I, in our work together for those days, for those who come, is offer some of the simple and systematic trainings in mindfulness, in compassion and loving kindness. UCLA has done some studies, and Dan will talk about them, in which kids who've been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD are helped significantly not through medication, but rather through being trained and taught how to focus their attention, or with the skills of social and emotional learning, how to deal with the bubbling emotions of their middle school life, or the traumas that they carry. And these are learnable skills that we can not only teach our kids, but are now being incorporated in tens of thousands of school systems. I have in front of me a page from the cover of the Wall Street Journal, one of its sections, which talks about the very problem you raised, and it lists the 45 million, 60 million prescriptions for medication that are being given to children for ADHD, antidepressants, antipsychotics, and others. And we have a medical system that needs to now learn to be complemented by the inner trainings that neuroscience is showing are equally successful in many, many cases, and much more helpful in other cases for our children and for adults as well.
So there's actually research, I hear you saying, that says mindfulness and inner regulation could help children with their well-being and with their focus, and that perhaps, we rush to medication too quickly, and these skills that could be taught to children and, of course, adults, that could circumvent this proliferation of so many people being on psychotropic drugs. 60 million prescriptions in a year, I assume you mean, is
60, not 16, 60.
Yes, that's what 60 million. That's like
for children.
That's insane to me. Because, see, this would be my, and I don't know that you can answer this question, but my concern, and when I have parents in that start revealing that this is what's going on with their kids, I try and get them to psychiatrists that will deal holistically and look at other options, and particularly nutrition, because kids have undiagnosed or unidentified allergies and intolerances, and I think we're too quick to go to medication, to psychotropic drugs in particular. And I just feel like the direction that our healthcare system has gone anyway is problematic, in that there's a time crunch in the doctor's office, and there's what's the easiest thing to do? It's not to, do a little research and find out maybe what are the causative factors of these things, but just to treat the symptom, because I think ADD or ADHD is a symptom, not the root of the problem.
Often that's the case, and it's true if we take the time, and now the neuroscience research really backs this up. There are ways to support our children or ourselves in ways of self-regulation, of increasing the window of emotional tolerance so that people learn how to be with uncomfortable feelings, or how to release trauma that's carried in the body and in the emotional body, in ways that our children then learn how to regulate themselves, and how to stay steady without using medications. And that's part of what we'll be teaching and focusing on, along with the neuroscience of love, which is, again, something that I think interests people a lot. We all want loving relationships. We even would like loving relationships between the peoples and nations of the world. But how do we actually do it? What is the science of it, of secure attachment, and of what the interpersonal neurobiologists have learned about the cultivation of love? And then Buddhist psychology has all these wonderful trainings, some of which we'll do on those days, in which these skills can be taught and developed and learned, and they really change your life. So I'm very glad to be coming to LA to both present them and also be part of the community here.
Well, we're glad to have you. With me is Jack Kornfield, who is one of the leading Buddhist teachers in America and has been a practitioner for over 40 years. And Jack and Dan Siegel will be at UCLA October 5th and 6th, and you can find information by going to the company that puts it on is actually a nonprofit, and their site is lifespanlearn.info, lifespanlearn.info, and all the information is there. You can sign up, etc. So let's talk about love. Is there a science of love?
There's an inner science of love, and a neuroscience is beginning to study it as well. I'll go to the other direction. There are ways to cultivate and develop compassion and loving kindness that are being studied by researchers such as Richie Davidson that show brain changes and neuroplasticity that begin to allow our capacities for compassion and love, or to approach challenges with a loving attitude, that neuroscience is showing can be trained within 6 or 8 or 10 weeks. And I'm also part of an organization in LA called Insight LA, INSIGHT LA in Santa Monica, that offers these trainings for psychologists or parents or children. It's a really wonderful group there. And part of it is simply learning how to cultivate and direct the heart's attention toward love, and learning to distinguish between love and attachment, or love and grasping, how to be dedicated and caring without needing to hold on to the way that person will be. There's a training in the loving, in India they actually called it the loving gaze, in which you're able to, with the heart, to see another person and hold them in love and connection without a lot of expectation from them. And our children flower in that way. Our partners flower when we're dedicated and loving to them, and they return it to us. And these things can be trained and they can be learned. You know, there's one more thing, Nita.
Uh-huh.
In meeting together with the Dalai Lama and some other leading Buddhist teachers, one of the themes that's come up among us is the question of self-hatred, the opposite of love, and self-criticism and self-judgment that's so common in the West. The Dalai Lama was really shocked to learn this because it's not common among Tibetan people. And his first response when he heard our struggles and questions with it, he said, "But this is a mistake. Why would anyone not love themselves?"
What a great answer. Or question.
And then he asked, how many of you teachers Western teachers have this experience? Almost everybody's hand went up. And then we talked about how important it is from the beginning in our schools and children, but with ourselves as well, to learn how to work with self-criticism, self-judgment, and self-hatred, to hold all of that with a spirit of compassion, and to use that as the beginning of these trainings that open our capacities for presence in a whole different way. So that becomes really important for people, not to judge themselves, but rather to take these trainings and practices and incorporate them in ways that develop the sense of dignity and self-worth and nobility that is central to Buddhist psychology, but that's really central to our humanity.
Why do you think, and also if, I don't know if you're in your conversation with the Dalai Lama, if he reflected on this, why is it that this is self-hatred and self-criticism is so common in the West and less so in the East?
If you go to visit the Tibetan children's village and school, which has been created for orphans, and there's thousands of them because of what's happened to the Tibetan people under the communist Chinese army, they're some of the most joyful, beautiful, open-spirited children you'll see anywhere, even in spite of the loss of being an orphan, the loss of their family or parents. And it's partly because they are held and loved and esteemed. There's some way in which the Tibetans so love and value their children that when the children receive it, they beam it back to whoever they meet. And it really gives a sense of what it means to hold and educate our children first from the values of the heart, along with the worldly skills that they need.
Okay, we're going to take, before we completely run out of time, we're going to start taking some calls. We're going to go to Tom in Los Angeles. Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Jack, just love your programs with Joe Frank in the past. Just wanted to say that. And also, I was just wanting to ask you, because you were talking about self-love, I somehow have lost my track. I really have nothing to complain about, but a little drinking on the side, and I'm just really looking to make that move real soon to get out of it.
Okay, so your question is how to motivate yourself?
Well, I do that, but I guess my question is more that if he has some advice, I'm gonna go to a program and I'm gonna start over, I guess.
Okay.
First of all, just your raising this, Tom, is really important. And one of the beautiful things that we know from Buddhist psychology and modern neuroscience and neuroplasticity is that it's never too late to start over. That if you get yourself in a program or start, since you talked about alcohol, if you start in 12-step work or whatever program really helps you, that it's quite possible to really transform your life. And it means, of course, that you have to then at first begin to get the support to deal with the things that we generally run away from, whether it's our loneliness or fears or self-criticism, and to be able to see those and hold them as part of your humanity, not that there's something wrong with you, but that we all have fears.
Right,
we all have our
my family's doing an intervention, and they're flying me over to their city, and I'm just going to take the chance. I mean, I've never been like this ever. I'm usually happy-go-lucky-go guy and do what I want to do and travel, but somewhere I just fell in a hole.
Well, we all have our challenges, and, not to minimize what's going on with you, treating addiction and alcoholism is a specialty of mine, and so I have great compassion for what you're going through. And I want to say to you, Tom, it's so courageous of you to go to see your family and to accept the help that they are offering you. I'm really proud of you, and be in touch with me and let me know how that goes. And from your location, I may be able to locally resource you after you go through your initial program. Thank you so much for your call, and I wish you the very best with that. Wow, Jack, I'm so sorry. We're running completely out of time here. So let me mention again that you will be at UCLA. The program is October 5th and 6th, and people can go to lifespanlearn.info and get the information. And thank you for being with me today and for joining us on InnerVision. And I look forward to seeing you October 5th and 6th at the event. And the quote I'm going to end the show with today is actually from your website. And I ask you to think about this as you go throughout your day. Life is so hard. How can we be anything but kind? Thanks for listening to InnerVision. I'm your host, Nita Valens. Have a great day.